Holy Week begins today, and it's all about opening and closing, binding and unbinding, tying up and releasing, untying and tying back up. We should have sung, "Blessed be the ties that bind," but it really wasn't a good hymn for today. But how can Holy Week be about both of those things, the fastening and the unfastening at the same time? How can that be? It can only be so by the magic of grace and the alchemy of love. So I want to correct your understandings of Palm Sunday. And it goes like this. Many, many people will tell you that Jesus went into the city to save it from its sin. I believe Jesus went to Jerusalem and had them untie that donkey because he loved the city. It's a really different thing. It's a really different way of being. You'll see in the segment that the story that Sarah just read, the disciples keep saying, why? Why do you want me to do this? And Jesus does not answer. In fact, there's no place that he says, I'm going in there to fix them. I'm going in there to save them. He says, I'm just going. And the only answer, if you know Jesus, is to say, well, he must have loved them. How does blessed be the tie that binds go? Blessed be the ties that bind our hearts in Christian love. We are to tie ourselves up and with each other, and then to untie ourselves up and with each other. Why? Because love isn't bondage. Love is a choice. Love is election. Love is a way of going into the city because we want to go into the city. The donkey is our first instruction. Jesus orders the disciples to go steal a donkey. They are to untie it and bring it to him for his triumphant rise into Jerusalem, where he will die. The rolled away stone is the second instruction. First, the stone is affixed, and then it isn't anymore. We tie, we untie, we bind, we unbind. Even the spiritual motions of Holy Week are a lot like breath. It comes in, it goes out. It has to come in, and it has to go out. It can't just be one motion. It's a spiritual motion, like breath, first held, then released over and over and over again. We're not just at the opening of Holy Week today, we're also at the end of March, thanks be to God. And March is also upon us. I hope you didn't miss the snowstorm last night. It was a real beauty. It's also, the end of March is also upon us with gas leaks, leaking the urban confidence out of us, and mental illness in pilots, leaking what is left of our trust in the skies. We come to these palms with just a little bit of PTSD. Because didn't it smell, so many of you told me, that the air smelt so much like the days after 9/11 this week in our neighborhood. We come to big subjects in a big time at the end of a long winter. And we also have the gift of the climate ribbon here with us today. And at the offertory, we're each going to add a ribbon to it. And a ribbon is a little bit like the confusion we have about Jesus at Palm Sunday. On the ribbon, we're going to write down something that we don't want to lose as the environment changes. And so it'll be like a lament, or it'll be like a confession, but it'll mostly be an act of love. Not an act of salvation, but an act of love. I love this so much, I don't want to lose it. And the last time we put ribbons on the trees, that many of you said the most beautiful things, and I forgot to tell you what I loved the most then. I would hate to lose waterfalls. I once had a job in the last century, in the 1990s, that had me driving around the 4 counties of western Massachusetts. Every day, I averaged about 100 miles a day in the 4 counties of western Mass. And I visited small churches and helped them install indoor plumbing. And it was pretty country. I never went directly to any of the churches. I always went the back way because I was on a sleuth for all the waterfalls in western Massachusetts. If I was going to get all that mileage, I was going to see all that beauty. I even made a map of the 130 waterfalls that I found. And I began to think of them as one of my few moments of grace between a lot of obligation. And the waterfalls just flowed. And I didn't have any responsibility for them. You know, there was nothing I could do to make them flow better or flow worse. They weren't mine, and they did not belong to me. They belong to Jerusalem. So when we think about Jesus going into Jerusalem, I think he did it the way we'll write on those ribbons later. Not just lament, and not just confession, and not just guilt, and not just sin, but I love waterfalls. I want to tie my love with yours into something beautiful. Will that save it? I don't know. But if I don't do that, how can I think about saving something before I love it? My friend Mary Ludi, a former nun, wrote this about responsibility and love. She said that on one Columbus Day weekend, she went to church and the prayer of confession jumped out at her, saying, "Oh God, we have enslaved your people and raped your land." And another time we had to say, "We're so sorry for hating our bodies." And she says to this, "I don't treat my body as well as it deserves, but I can't honestly say I hate it. Plus, I never raped any land ever." And there, some confessions, as she put it, stick in the throat. And the assumption that's being made when Jesus goes into Jerusalem to save Jerusalem from its sins, what did Jerusalem do to Jesus? Didn't he love it first? Mary goes on, "But I love confession anyway. I don't even mind being lumped in with the conquistadores every now and then. I know my pedestrian sins are not the moral equivalent of mass murder, but I also know that, as someone once put it, over the years I've collected a lot of sewage in my heart." Faced with huge moral choices, she says, like whether to hide Jews from the SS, I hope I'd hide them. I get Mother Teresa's reply to someone who declared her a living saint when she said, "I'm not a living saint, there's a Nazi asleep in my soul." Mary calls her human condition a sinful condition and a chronic condition, and she begs us to please stop bragging about how large our sins are and get them to the right size. The right size. She's arguing that even our confession is sometimes grandiose. I like to use the words that Mark Twain used about Jesus. Mark Twain didn't say this about Jesus, but Palm Sunday has such an ostentatious humility, right? It's so showy about being so humble. And Mark Twain argued that the real human condition was how proud we are about how humble we are. And this goes with what Mary was saying about confessions being too big. It's just too big. How did we get so off base about understanding our human responsibilities? How did we become so big, even in our sense of sin? I think, and it's going to be very conventional, that we miss the mark of our true humanity. And what was the mark of our true humanity? It was to love each other and not go in fixing things and improving them before we really love them. Thomas Aquinas put it this way, and you've heard it a million times: men, by which I'm assuming he meant people, people use what they ought to enjoy, and they enjoy what they ought to use. The Westminster Catechism puts the same idea another way. And by the way, these are old orthodoxies. So if you hear me picking a fight with the atonement, I am. But I'm also saying that it wasn't the best idea Christianity ever had. In the Westminster Catechism, we get the same thing. It's argued there that our purpose in life is to glorify God and enjoy God, and to do so forever. Westminster said that we are to enjoy nature, not use it. To enjoy Jerusalem, not use it. To enjoy Jerusalem before we try to save it. So at the same time, whatever your waterfall is, whatever love you put on your ribbon, you will want it also to be acquainted with your fear and your sense that maybe you didn't love it enough yet. Or the sense that it could go from you might be around something over which you have control, which is to love it more. Just to love it more. So, human beings, we do have the power to annihilate nature. We have nuclear weapons that could blow it up. We also have the power of neglect. We have the power of selfishness, all of which combine to put our home in the world in danger. And I know that's kind of extreme, but it's true. It's true. This is what apocalypse or catastrophe on 2nd Avenue or pilots crashing into mountains in the Alps tell us. We do have the power to destroy, and it is the equivalent of our power to create and to love. Joseph Sittler says you can put down this great power to destroy by skiing, or you can drown it in bourbon. You can trot it off to Bermuda, or push it under with your accelerating occupations, or you can even say your prayers and then drink some more bourbon. But it always comes back to us and survive and talks back. We know it's there. I don't know what happened to you on Thursday when the buildings on 2nd Avenue exploded, but I do know what happened to me. My inbox lit up with people all around the world. Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Well, yeah, I was okay. If you mean by okay, I didn't know anyone directly impacted. We begin by reaching for the things and the people we can touch. My daughter, who is a bit of a catastrophe tracker, phoned and said, "Mom, you weren't there, right?" And I said, "No, I wasn't there." And she said, "Great, bye, gotta go." And I thought, well, okay, thank you for calling. The same thing happened with the German plane. 2 Americans were on board, we finally hear. And now we're supposed to care more. It's supposed to be some kind of relief. Blessed be the ties that binds our hearts in nuclear and national love. We are so very small, as small and common as that donkey, that all we know to do in the face of nameless and faceless tragedy is to put a face on it. I'm not saying it's bad. Were you there, Mom? No, I wasn't there, Katie. Good. Gotta go. Bye. But on Thursday, what's the song we're going to sing? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there? Or was just Jesus there, not trying to save you from your sin, but just to love you? Holy Week thrusts us into these binds and ties and tethers. It ties us to each other by tying us to Jesus' death. That tie can be a bind and it can be a release. But first and foremost, it is a joy to be tied, to be able to love. We are tied to each other. I couldn't get Richard Wilbur's old poem from 1921 out of my head. You're going to know it, Advice to a Prophet. We haven't hauled it out for a long time. This is Richard Wilbur talking about the early appreciation of nuclear power, not that it existed the way it does now, and the early appreciation of environmental destruction. And he says to the prophet, "When you come, as you soon must, to the streets of our city, mad-eyed from stating the obvious, not proclaiming our fall, but begging us in God's name to have self-pity, spare us all word of the weapons, their force and range, the long numbers that rocket the mind. Our slow, unreckoning hearts will be left behind, unable to fear what is too strange. Nor shall you scare us with the talk of the death of the race. How could we ever dream of this world without us? The sun, mere fire, the leaves untroubled about us, a stone look on the stone's face. Speak, prophet, of the world's own change. Though we cannot conceive of an undreamt thing, we know to our cost how the dreamt cloud crumbles. The wines are blackened by frost, how the view alters. We could believe, if you told us so, that the white-tailed deer will slip into perfect shade, grown perfectly shy. The lark avoid the reaches of our eyes, the jack pine lose its knuckled grip on the cold ledge, and every torrent burn, as xanthus once, its gliding trout stunned in a twinkling. What would we be without the dolphin's ark, the dove's return? These things in which we have seen ourselves and spoken, ask us, prophet, how shall we call our natures forth when that live tongue is all dispelled? Ask us whether with the worldless rose our hearts shall fail us. Come demanding whether there shall be lofty or long-standing when the bronze annals of the oak tree close. We can be tied or untied, tethered or untethered, connected or disconnected, and the verbs and the action are the verbs to love, to connect, to care, to tie, to tether freely, the way Jesus took that donkey into the city, saying, I want to go there. I want to love Jerusalem. Amen.